Your coterie departs Budapest and by extension Hungary to head for the border of Transylvania as you begin rolling your wagon caravan along in the direction of the Carpathian Mountains. And it's several weeks before you begin to see the mountains materialize in the distance, seeming far away at first, and then progressively drawing closer and closer with every night. As you travel as fast as your horse and wagons can move, you expect to reach the eastern border of Transylvania in about 3 weeks from the time of your departure. You bring supplies with you. You bring your men and your retainers and the laborers, and of course, there are 3 wagons which are reinforced and sealed with pitch and ash, which seals you against the daylight. And these wagons are, they're carriages which are reinforced with steel and thick, heavy shutters which protect the people inside from any potential ambush or arrows. But the good news is that in the following weeks, you actually don't run into any sort of violence at all, any sort of attack. It's rather uneventful. You can't afford to take your time because moving any faster would defeat your purpose in any case, because if you reached the higher passes among the Carpathians, winter would still be here and travel would be impossible. So you expect to arrive about the time the snows begin to thaw. And there are a few difficulties finding sufficient vessels from which to feed in the following weeks, though it's not impossible. It's just people are very sparse in the eastern edge of Hungary and going into Transylvania. It leaves you a little hungry and edgy, with no blood to raise frivolously. So net all, I'm going to say all of you lose about 2 blood points during the journey due to the relative lack of vessels. Everyone go ahead and subtract 2 blood from your pool. And as I said, you're a little edgy and hungry, but most of the journey is tedious and uncomfortable, but hardly threatening at all.
So Hendrik, of course, brought his herd and his retainers, and if it looks like an emergency situation, he will allow fellow kindred to take a little from his herd if it becomes absolutely necessary. But of course, there's always that situation where Henrik views this as a very great favor that he is bestowing upon anyone who partakes of that.
Yeah, the journey is hardly threatening. Like I said, it's a little, vessels are a little scarce, but other than that, it's relatively uneventful. However, once you cross into Transylvania and you leave Hungary behind, you notice that the local peasants act uniformly abject and terrified of you, as if they know exactly who and what you are. You've heard whispers of some of the villages that you pass through, of the great lords who travel the winds of the night. And while some Hungarian nobles and Saxon shopkeepers in the area may be fooled by you, the peasants seem to know exactly what they're dealing with, and they avoid you if at all possible. You notice that as you travel throughout the Carpathian Plain, this fertile farmland holds few towns. The one in the distance that you intend to stop by on your way towards the pass is Klausenberg. Or rather, the Hungarians call it Klausenberg. Actually, the Romanians, the native Vlachs, call it Cluj or Napuca. And it's really the only large city on your way to Bistritz. And as you travel into Klausenberg or into Napuca, We're going to open our first scene. Unless there's anything, actually, no, before we first open our first scene, we're going to go around and we're going to have you basically describe your character and how you take in the journey. So we're going to start with Soren. Soren, describe your character throughout this journey.
Soren keeps very much to himself. He's always got a book in his hand. He seems to be writing quite a lot during the journey. He does not partake in the offer that Henrik has offered the group. He wishes to try and show his resilience and independence, sort of. And as they take in the countryside, he seems to be jotting down notes of the countryside, the things that they have passed and the things that they have seen, as well as the town life when they arrive.
All right, next we go to Nikolai.
Similar to Soren, Nikolai has been fending for himself, trying to ensure that only those that deserve to be fed upon are. He wants to make sure that no innocents are harmed.
All right, and next we go to Milo.
Milo would spend most of the time here trying to get to know and try to calm down and ease down Shirazina, and basically not brainwash her, sorry, but make her feel like her life is not in danger. And he would even tell her that she will be returned to her family at a later date, but that will not be now. But that is mainly what he's gonna be spending his time on. If everybody else is keeping to themselves, he's gonna be thinking about how to address everybody once they reach their destinations, because he does want to more formally introduce himself to everybody. So
Shirazina is actually relatively quiet throughout the journey, although as you draw closer to Transylvania over the coming weeks, she seems to grow more and more anxious, or perhaps excited. And next we move to Henrik.
Henrik is going to spend his time, establishing his authority over these soldiers that he had literally just met before the journey began. So he's going to take some time to, not in a like, hey, we're friends, but he wants to get to know the soldiers as much as possible so he could utilize their strengths and know their weaknesses. And he's also going to be greatly interested in the countryside and reviewing the maps of the region. He's constantly trying to strategize and think 10 steps ahead. Question. We are actually going to Bistritz before we go to the pass?
No, that's not necessary. I mean, you will pass within range of Bistritz, but if you so choose, you can pass into Bistritz if you desire.
That is something that we should definitely discuss if we want to go ahead and stop there first, because that will allow us to get a sense of the place, as well as maybe go ahead and establish contact with the Zabiti Lord right off the bat. But I will hold off that decision until we get closer. But other than getting the lay of the land, getting to know the soldiers that are with us, he will also at least make overtures to the other kindred in the party. He doesn't necessarily view them as equals, except for maybe Milo. But he realizes that he must work with these other kindred, whether he likes it or not. So, at least once a night, Hendrik will at least strike up a conversation with each one of the other vampires, just to get a feel for them as well, just like he did the mortal soldiers under his command.
So throughout the journey, in terms of actual numbers, you have about 7 retainers, seven soldiers, 7 warriors, not including your own retainers, which you may count Orlin among those warriors. There are also around 15 laborers, peasants mostly. Some of them are settlers, which are, of course, the Mongol descended people. Most of them are Saxons, however, Saxons that have come over from Germany, and because there's a great migration that is taking place out of the Holy Roman Empire and into Eastern Europe, where there's nothing but land and opportunity. It's kind of a frontier for them. And the laborers seem to be organized quite quickly under Miklos. And Orlin is surprisingly quick, and you do see that Orlin has taken to organizing the soldiers during the day, as he is your squire, and he, if we're talking about strict rank here, he's not a simple footman, he is your squire. Mm-hmm. And this is the first time you've ever seen leadership from him, because, of course, while you're resting during the day, it's up to him to organize the caravan. And Orlin, he actually takes to it with surprising aplomb.
I want to give him a nod of approval. I'm not trying to beat him into jelly. As far as I'm concerned, the way I treat Orlin is pounding a sword, making it sharper. So if he is displaying leadership abilities and things of that nature, then I see it as an achievement on my part. But I'm not going to be overly complimentary. I just give him a nod of approval when I see him doing something obviously right.
Kettlewick does what he can to keep up the spirits of everyone as you travel through this dark land. He always seems to have some kind of body tune or limerick or riddle, as kind of cavorting with the rest of the caravan and entertaining them and doing his best to keep everyone's spirits up. And while that works beautifully at first, towards the end, he just becomes little more than an annoyance to the men who have really had enough of the fool, and he finds his jokes are growing more and more stale, especially as the dark wilderness of Transylvania continues to close in around everyone. There's something about the environment of Transylvania as you pass into this land that makes you feel small, makes you feel as though you're in the presence of a land that is far greater and far older than anything you could imagine. It's almost as if you could smell the age in the air around you. But with that, we're going to switch to Ebba now.
Well, before I begin, I had a couple questions. First off, the laborers and soldiers that are traveling with us, I'm assuming they have some sort of idea of what we are? Or do they have no clue?
The soldiers seem to know, but the laborers don't ask questions, although they seem distinctly nervous around you.
Okay. Yeah, this is tough. I feel like during these several weeks of travel, if Ebba knows that the laborers are not completely aware of who they are traveling with. She wouldn't want to spook them in any way, but at the same time, 3 weeks of travel in carriages is going to definitely, she's going to become quite restless. So in my mind, I imagined that during the day she would probably be in the carriages, but at night she would be on the outskirts of the road with Varg, kind of traveling that way. But if that's not realistic, I'm not sure. What would you say?
Well, there's no way to stay with the caravan and not sleep in one of the carriages during the day.
Right, exactly. And that's why I said during the day she would be in the carriages, but at night she would need to move her legs.
Right.
She can't. She's not built for that sort of travel. It would make her completely and totally restless. But if she knows that the laborers would be suspicious, she would travel in the carriages with the others, but it would be really hard for her, and she would be very irritated, and irritable, and she probably wouldn't talk much to anybody else.
Well, I mean, the laborers seem to they don't ask questions, but they seem to know that you're not human. There's something different about you. They honestly, it looks like they don't want to know. They're here for opportunity. They're here for prosperity, and that's what you represent to them, even if you are frightening.
Well, in that case, then she definitely would at night. She would be out on the outskirts of the road with Varg. She obviously wouldn't want to scare the laborers or anything like that, so she'd kind of keep her distance. But they would always be able to see where the carriages are, and they'd be traveling on the outskirts. And of course, once they became close to villages and things of that nature, she would definitely hone in a bit. She would make sure that she was traveling amongst the carriage instead of out in the woods with Varg. She's at least smart enough to know that she doesn't want to draw attention to them. But other than that, I mean, the journey for her goes quite uneventful. She's not much of a talker, as I'm sure most of the others have kind of picked up on. And she would have pretty much kept to herself, and really only communicated with Varg if she wanted to speak about something. He is her closest companion on this journey, so that is what Ebba would be doing.
And during the day, Varg he keeps close enough to the caravan that he's clearly following you from the tree line. He doesn't walk with the men on the road. Of course, he's not a tame wolf, but he does keep close to the caravan. And at first, he frightened the men, but after 3 weeks of traveling, the presence of the large white wolf seemed to comfort them and reassure them rather than frighten them, as he seems to be some sort of silent protector that remains close at all times. We're going to do a couple rolls before we move on. First, Nikolai, you said you want to offer spiritual counseling to the laborers.
Yeah, it seemed appropriate.
Okay, and they do, they do have their spiritual needs. I mean, there are no priests out here, and most of them, while most of them are Catholic, they nonetheless would accept the services of even an Orthodox priest, especially since this land is so dark and barbaric. Go ahead and roll a charisma leadership roll. It's going to be difficulty 7 since you're Orthodox.
Charisma, what was it again?
Charisma leadership, difficulty 7, since it would be 6, but it's 7 because you're Orthodox.
Wow.
Oh no.
Well.
Yeah. Well, they actually don't take to you.
No, they don't.
Very well at all. It's not a botch, but it is a failure. Yeah, they don't take. I mean, just you're a very charismatic, commanding sort of man, but at the same time, they are suspicious of you, and they look at you as a foreigner and an outsider. And when you do approach them to try and bless them and talk to them, they
it's the
sort
accent.
of
No one likes the accent.
right. They one of them even called you a foreign bastard and kind of turned away from you. And clearly they're not they're not friendly towards you, and you find that you're unable to establish any kind of camaraderie or bond with them. How would Nikolai react to this sort of frustration?
He would be disappointed, but it's not unusual. So it would be more he would take it in stride.
Yeah. You're experiencing firsthand kind of the prejudices which run deep in this land and divide everyone, and they're clearly still quite strong. We're going to also make a roll for Milo. Milo's going to go ahead and make a roll as you draw closer to Sherazina in the following weeks. Milo, go ahead and roll a charisma empathy roll.
All right,
as you try to win her trust. Difficulty is going to be 7. She knows she's a prisoner, and she knows that you're using her as a hostage.
Oh, sorry, I made that public.
Yeah, all social roles, all physical roles are all public. Only mental roles, virtue roles, and willpower roles are private.
Oh yeah, of course, this was supposed to be. Yeah, of course, I was mixing up mental and social there. Okay, well.
Oh, so that's public.
Correct.
Oops.
Yeah, that's all right. We're still getting into this. You really establish a connection with Sherazina. I mean, you're charming and you're handsome, and she seems to really enjoy your company. She was very, very slow to open up at first, but after the first week and a half, she really starts opening up to you and talking to you and even enjoying your time with you. Make a wits empathy roll, difficulty 8. Now this one's going to be private because it's mental. Okay, well, with 2 successes, I will let you know that you notice out of the corner of your eye, Lorraine, who shares your carriage and shares your company with Sherazina. She laughs and participates in the company that you keep, but you notice an unmistakable flash, a sense of jealousy coming from her as you draw closer to Sherazina. And as Sherazina warms up to you, you notice that Lorraine has a very noticeable edge of jealousy to her. In fact, she becomes fairly cold towards Sherazina towards the end of the journey. It's not something, she's not rude or openly dismissive of her, but you can tell that she has become noticeably jealous of your connection with this young woman. How does Milo respond to learning this information kind of over the course of the weeks, if anything?
Oh, he would address it if they get a chance. He would address it when Sherazina wasn't present. Obviously, he would drag Lorraine aside and address it just shortly, so like he wouldn't make a big fuss about it, so she doesn't think it's a big fuss, and he would let her in on his plans, which you would probably know already, which I wrote to you. So that's, I mean, she's not gonna be here forever.
She seems reassured by that, and comforted by the reassurance. She communicates to you that she doesn't want to lose you, and that she wants you all to herself, and that she loves you, and that this woman means nothing. And as long as this woman means nothing to you, then she is content.
I don't love this woman. I only love Lorraine, is what I will tell her.
And that's exactly what she wanted to hear. Yeah, that's music to her ears. We're going to do one last roll for Henrik, as he gets to know the men and establishes a bit of command over them. Henrik, go ahead and roll your charisma leadership roll. You are, however, not a foreigner, so the difficulty will be 6.
Now, because I believe that this is like very important to establish my leadership amongst these men, I'm going to spend a willpower point for automatic success.
Okay.
And you said charisma plus leadership, right?
Correct. Difficulty 6.
So that's total of 5 successes.
5 successes, absolutely. You establish yourself as their lord, as their commander. They all look to you instinctively, and they seem reassured by your presence. You are, and through Orlin, they know that your command is felt, and they have a great deal of respect for you by the end of the 3 weeks, because you did take the time to try and organize them and talk to them, and not just the fighting men, but the peasants as well, the laborers. They know that you are the lord of this carriage and this expedition, and that gives them a sense of reassurance that there is a clear command structure, and because they're used to having a lord. And so naturally, they begin to look to you as their protector in this wilderness. But with that, we're going to switch scene as we begin our first real scene this evening as you arrive outside Napoca, or Klausenburg. We open our scene this evening in the dark wilds of Transylvania. And what we see is the sun, a blood-red orb that is shrouded behind rolling dark clouds, dip below the horizon and vanish behind the Carpathian mountains. And as the last rays of the sun die, the vampires that make up the caravan which rumbles along the road in the distance, a collection of perhaps 20, 25 men in all, among 3 carriages, most of them on foot, Orlin riding his horse ahead of them. The carriage wheels creak and bump occasionally over the odd stone. It's not a gentle journey, but it's not enough to disturb your deathless sleep within these carriages. As everyone rises for the evening, go ahead and subtract an additional blood point from your pool for rising for the night. And as you approach Napoca in the distance, Klausenburg, you see Klausenburg just as you're rising for the evening and leaving your carriage, and as some of you may do, to mount your horse, or perhaps you stay in the carriage. It's nonetheless, you can open the shutters and look outside and see the city, what was supposed to be a city, looming in the distance. There's a sturdy stone wall surrounding Klausenburg, and a simple gate. There's no portcullis or anything like that, and a stout stone keep rises up from the center of Klausenburg, which, your impression was that it was supposed to be a city, but as you get closer, you see that it is little more than a few muddy streets scattered between wooden houses and straw and daub hovels, some of them on the outside of the walls as well. You can tell immediately after you rise that your servants have endured a long, weary, wet day on the road. In fact, it rained while you were asleep. And your ghouls are tired and hungry. The horses are slow, and the mud is thick on the ground. Everyone is exhausted and happy to finally be within range of Klausenburg. And as you enter through the front gates, you do so with no, resistance. There are 2 men posted at the gates, which are closed at this time of night, but they open when they see your entourage coming closer. And the caravan passes into Klausenburg, and you find yourself rolling down the muddy streets and seeing the few peasants and people that live there quickly shutting their doors, shutting their shutters, as if expecting you. And you notice there is a dilapidated church at one end of the village. Strangely, even though the whole town is surrounded by a stout stone wall anchored by a centrally placed keep, as I mentioned, as you pass close to the keep, which dominates the village itself, everyone go ahead and make a wits alertness roll, difficulty 8. All right, to those of you who achieved enough successes, I will be relaying some results to you. One moment. All right. So just for clarification, anyone who scored 3 successes or more received a notice. But with that, you find yourself pulling into Klausenburg, and eventually, the two guardsmen which hailed you as you enter the village sort of did so rudely, asking your business in Klausenburg. And as they do so, they approach you, and at this time, I imagine Henrik is out on his horse. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Then
What
they would have
language
they're speaking Vlach or Romanian.
Okay, I can understand that.
As they approach you, they greet you as your caravan kind of pulls in front of what appears to be an inn. A sign hanging outside with a boot kind of carved on the outside. Clearly an indication that this is an inn or a place to stay. And as the caravan comes to a stop, you see two soldiers are carrying spears and wearing metal skull caps come up to you, Henrik. One of them approaches you. "Halt, outsiders! What brings you to Klausenburg?"
We are traveling through, and beyond that, it is none of your concern.
"Well, we must ask your business. How long do you intend to stay?"
We are planning to stay a night or two at the most.
And at that moment, you see that one of them glances at the other, and he glances at him, and he says, "Well, there's precious little in this village. We have little supplies and even fewer rooms to accommodate so many of you." And he motions to your large caravan. He says, "The inn here may be able to furnish meals to your men, but perhaps it would be better if you were on your way to Bistritz. There you are sure to find ample room, my lord."
Our people are tired and weary. We shall find accommodations here.
They frown and glance at each other again before moving away from you. And with that, you find yourself parked outside the only inn, which for those of you who can read is called the Sign of the Travelers. But very few can read. Really, it's just the boot that everyone recognizes on the sign. And as we stop finally in Napoca, I'm going to turn the scene over to you, and we're going to open up as you first arrive.
What, when we came in, besides the obvious behavior of the guards, is there anything else of note to Hendrik's eyes?
The villagers who live here quickly went inside their homes and shut their doors. I mean, if they were moving among the muddy streets, they quickly hurried along, and everyone seems to be avoiding you.
Did I get a sense that the guards, like he was saying that the inn was supposedly full?
He said that he said that there wasn't room for you. There wasn't room for a group of your size.
Well, obviously the inn would accommodate everyone.
I mean, it's a small, like, 2-story inn, and there's over like 20 men in your party. So
we could put maybe the mortals of import in the inn. The women, for example.
Oh, there's no women.
Well, I'm talking about amongst our party, like the handmaiden and.
Oh yeah, the retainers. Yeah.
Right. I'm looking around. Now I'm noticing. I'm gonna get the reactions of the others before I do anything else. So I'm just observing for a moment.
Milo would still be in the wagon, in the caravan, as they make their final stop, and as they do, he will open up the door, and the thick whiff of perfume from his carriage will blend in with the night air, and he will step out and look around and not get depressed, but be surprised about the poor state of things and not be happy about it. This was not what he had visualized. He had romanticized it probably a bit in his head, and this certainly wasn't what he was expecting. So he has a bit of a sad look on his face.
We're here at last, Lorraine says. She yawns. She spent most of the day sleeping with you and steps outside, clearly glad to stretch her legs finally.
Yes, quite. Though here isn't quite what I had expected, I must admit. Oh well, hopefully it gets better. He's trying to take it in stride and not let it show too much how he's feeling about this shabby hamlet. He would approach Henrik slowly, still just looking around, greeting him with a nod.
All right, and as Milo approaches Henrik, the camera is going to pan around to the other vampires in the caravan, see what they're doing. So just jump in anytime.
I'm thinking.
Soren will be stepping out of the carriage as his nose kind of frowns at the smell of this small hamlet. He starts looking around to see what places are open. He imagines the tavern is currently open, yes?
It seems to be. There are lights on inside.
As he closes his book, he begins to wrap it in a small piece of leather to kind of enclose it before sticking it into a pocket somewhere into his robes. Before he looks into the carriage and begins helping people down as they begin to exit.
All right, and I should note, Ebba, Varg, he stays outside the walls of Napoca. He doesn't follow you into the city.
Ebba, she probably would have been in the carriage with that Nikolai had been traveling in, and she would have been the first to exit the carriage, kind of jumping down from the little foothold onto the dirt ground, and like a little girl would do, kind of skipping ahead for a moment, and she would take in her surroundings, looking around the remote area they are in, and then kind of glancing over her shoulder at the others. She doesn't say much, just kind of taking everything in and keeping a keen eye on what's going on about them.
Once Hendrik has a chance to see what the others are doing, he's going to turn to Orlin. Boy, take a look around town. Find accommodations for the horses and our men. There may be abandoned buildings about that we can use.
Orlin nods, and he immediately dismounts his horse and turns to head inside the inn, his muddy boots echoing, his sword clinking as he approaches the inn, and he steps inside to apparently speak with the innkeeper to see what he can do about getting provisions for your caravan.
I'm going to go over to Milo. We need sometime we need to discuss immediate plans for where we go from here. The immediate option, of course, is to go straight to the pass. But if we are going near Bistitz, then we may want to stop there before we go further.
Yes, I agree. I think Bistet sounds like a place we would want to have a look at in person before we move on anyway. So it might be good to know how the terrain of the surrounding land, not only where we are going.
And I'm sure a city of that nature will suit more your taste. Isn't that right?
Milo would wrinkle his nose as he looked around a bit and look back to Henrik. I certainly hope so.
Do not worry. Your senses will not be insulted by this muck for much longer. We just need to stop long enough for the mortals to rest.
I certainly look forward to your country starting to present itself from a more flattering side than what I have been exposed to so far. I shall await in excitement.
A different life at the courts, it is not.
Indeed, sir. Indeed. Yet I accepted this, so I must take it in stride. Yes.
Once we reach the city, I expect your more diplomatic flair will come in much handy.
Hopefully we get to deal with men that we will not only need to lie and deceive, but that will be susceptible to us as we are.
In the distance, you can hear Kettlewick singing sort of a body tune which floats over the otherwise grim and quiet caravan. As I walked across the rocks so bare, I saw a maiden lying there. And as she lay in sweet repose, he tweaks one of the noses of the laborers. A breath of wind blew up her clothes.
Soren
Henrik.
pauses for a moment to hear the song of Kettlewick before he shakes his head, clearly not amused by the man's tune, before he approaches Henrik and Milo. My lords, are we stopping for a while?
Well, we are stopping for at least a night or two to allow the mortals to re-energize themselves, so to speak. This also might give us an opportunity to plan ahead. As I was saying to Milo here, we need to decide where we're going to go next, whether it's the pass or the city of Bistritz.
Yes, of course. He begins to look around. Perhaps we could speak on these matters in closed doors.
Of course, of course. Let us proceed into the inn and see what accommodations they have.
After you, my lord, before he bows and places out a hand.
So we go into the inn. See what Orlin is doing. See if he made any progress.
All right, and as Soren and Milo and Henrik head towards the inn, the camera's going to pan to Nikolai and Ebba to see what they are doing.
Well, the minute she hears them speaking about the inn, her shoulders just kind of shrink down as she turns and looks over, realizing that they're going to have to stay inside somewhere again, and she's quite restless as it is. And though nobody can hear her, she kind of gives Henrik and the rest kind of a stoic expression of sorts. Little bewildered, if you could call it that, and she mutters something under her breath in Swedish before walking towards them.
All right, and Nikolai.
Nikolai is remaining as unobtrusive as possible, he's still trying to get a feel for what role he is going to play and how he's going to be able to provide support. So it's he's just kind of remaining quiet in the background.
All right, and as you're looking around the town, Nikolai, go ahead and make a perception alertness roll. Difficulty will be 6. All right, you can roll at 10 again.
Same difficulty.
Correct. Oh, one more time.
Wow. Finally, I see something. Sorry.
His eyes are opened.
All right, relaying the results of that. All right, and as Nikolai is looking around with his sharp eyes, quite perceptive of what's going on around them, what are we seeing? How is he taking this in?
You just asking me something. I turned away.
As Nikolai is looking around, kind of with his sharp eyes, taking this in, what kind of how is he reacting to what he's seeing around him?
Yes. If anyone is actually watching him or paying attention, they would see that he straightens up. The look of relaxation of just watching his comrades is gone. There's not necessarily an animalistic, but definitely a look of heightened awareness.
All right, you see everyone else heading into the inn. Do you plan to follow?
I do plan to follow, still trying to remain unobtrusive and in the back. Nikolai is going to take up a position where he can watch the door.
All right. So as Nikolai heads towards the door and everyone heads inside the inn, we're going to switch scene to inside as everyone walks into the sign of the travelers. And inside you see a few people. I mean, it's fairly crowded as far as inns go, and even some of the laborers and soldiers, without prompting, they follow you inside. And there's even a musician playing the flute in the far corner. You didn't expect for such a shabby village. This is quite a nice inn, and it seems to have been funded by Saxon money from many of the Saxon merchants that pass through here. And the innkeep is speaking with Orlin. You see right away, Henrik, and the rest of you who follow Henrik into the inn, you see Orlin is speaking with the innkeeper, who's a stout man. The conversation seems to be tense, and everyone in the inn sort of stops their conversation. Well, not everyone, but most people stop their conversation, look in your direction as they see your entourage, your group, head inside. Henrik, you find yourself flanked by a couple of your own soldiers and who take up positions at the door, and you also see Nikolai lingering in the doorway. Orlin, he turns and walks back towards where you're standing with the rest of the coterie, and he says, "Master," he says, speaks in a lower voice, "this man tells us that there's no room for any of us, and that we have to leave for the streets." He looks mildly frustrated. He says he can feed us, but we have to go.
I stroll over to the innkeeper. Innkeep, who would happen to be occupying these rooms at this time of year? The passes are closed for the winter, so surely this place isn't overrun with merchants.
"Aye, my lord, we shelter many of the Saxons that come through here," he says.
He said, you said you shelter all the Saxons?
Yep.
I got distracted for a second, sorry. Are these Saxons of high birth or low birth?
Well, they're not nobility like yourself, my lord, he says with an edge of perhaps disrespect in his voice. You're not sure. It's very subtle. But they have money. Their coin is lifeblood of Napoca.
The last time I looked, I had money as well, and my blood the richer still.
Indeed, my
Tell
lord.
some of these Saxons to vacate the rooms. I will, of course, pay them back their money, but they will vacate those rooms. How many rooms do we need? And I look over at Orlin.
Orlin's eyes go wide, and he says, all of them, my lord. Even then, we won't be able to shelter everyone.
As long as we have all the rooms for the ladies of our entourage. The rest of us, did you happen to find a suitable camping spot within the city, abandoned building, anything of that nature? I look at the innkeep. What about abandoned buildings in this rustic place?
None of those, my lord. But there is. He trails off for a moment. Truly, it would be better if you simply moved on.
Spit it out. What were you about to say?
No matter, my lord. It's not fit for your... Surely a man of your stature would not have his yeomen sleep in stables.
Well, of course, that's why you're going to be vacating the rooms above. But we still have men that need adequate shelter.
Forgive me, my lord, but we have but 3, perhaps 4 rooms. Nothing to accommodate you, and if I throw my paying patrons out into the street next season, they will not stay here. I beg you, my lord, press on. Bistritz is just into the mountains. Another 8 hours, perhaps.
As Ebba's listening to this conversation unfold before them all, she would she be able to pick up on the fact that he's obviously trying to get them out of there?
Well, actually, yeah, he's not even trying to hide the fact that he wants you to leave. I mean, it's like Orlin said, they said they could feed you, but he doesn't, they clearly don't want you staying here.
Okay, well, in that case, she's not the sharpest tool, but she can pick up on the behavior and the way that this man is speaking to Henrik, as well as the rest of them for that matter, because they all are traveling together as a party. And her mind kind of roams to the fact that when they had first arrived here, she had noticed the keep that a lord would usually stay in with his family. And she's not sure if anyone else noticed, but it seemed to be empty and desolate, abandoned even. She's not sure if anyone else noticed that. And if they're not going to be able to stay here, she would kind of slip past the others and make her way to Henrik's side. And she's going to kind of lift her little hand up to the sides of his leathers and kind of pull on him, kind of indicating to him to lean down so she can cup her hand around his ear. And if he does so, she whispers to him, "There is a keep here. Don't know if you noticed it before, but it is abandoned, I believe."
Henrik, of course, listens to what she says, and he kind of nods his head at her, and he straightens up and he looks at the innkeep. "Why have you not mentioned this abandoned keep?"
His eyes tighten. My lord, our nobleman who stays here, the lord of this town. He is away. I cannot simply give away his home to strangers.
But it is abandoned, is it not?
No,
At least, who lives there right now? Who resides there at this moment?
Our protector, our lord. He is away.
Well, as a fellow nobleman, I am sure that he would not mind his hospitality being extended. We will reside there in the keep. But
My lord, I must protest. And as he raises his voice, you see several sturdy men kind of stand up from the tables and look in your direction with narrowed eyes. You see that some of them are carrying bows, and even one of them picks up a torch from the wall. As things grow a bit more tense, the innkeeper raises both hands and, my lord, I beg you, I cannot extend hospitality on behalf of our lord. He would crucify us if he knew you were staying in his home.
Milo would step forward and
Can
put
I
a
roll?
hand on Henrik's shoulder and say, "Sir Henrik, may I have a quick word with you?"
I give the innkeeper and the men with the bows a dangerous look, but then I turn and I say yes.
Milo will gesture for them to go outside, so they will be out of earshot of these particular men, at least. Just outside the door.
I'm very reluctant to give any ground, especially in front of these mongrels. But a fellow nobleman has asked this favor of me, so I will give but an inch, and I will follow Milo out of the inn.
I apologize for interrupting you, sir. I did not mean to do that, but I think the situation is maybe going a bit out of hand. As much as this offends me as well, we do have to remember that we are supposed to be here incognito, as it were. We do not want to call any unwanted attention to ourselves, and this very much seems like it might very well turn into unwanted attention. How long is it to the next city? Maybe it would be easier if we just moved on. We can return here later and show these people why they need to respect us, but our assignment is the most important for now, as much as I regret it. I will stand with you whatever you decide, but I merely wanted to, express this. I do not want
After a
anyone to
moment,
get...
Lorraine comes out of the inn to where you're speaking tersely with Henrik. My love, are we... When are we getting our rooms? My feet, my legs, they ache. I desire a hot bath.
As Lorraine comes up to Milo's side and he's speaking with Henrik, Ebba, she actually is this innkeep on the other side of the bar? Is he behind?
He is, and Henrik and Milo are speaking outside, like just outside the inn.
Oh, so they've left.
Yeah, we've just gone step right outside.
We're just right outside discussing. Yeah, we're just right outside discussing it.
Okay, are the rest of us still inside?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, Ebba, as they kind of walk off, she would actually, with her little legs, she kind of pulls herself up onto one of the bar stools, and she was taking in what this innkeep was saying, and she's like intently kind of staring at him with her eyes, and she's looking at him, studying him a moment before she speaks up. You're lying. Why are you lying? She says.
He looks at you bewildered and seems rather confused at first, because you are, of course, a small child, but the look you are giving him clearly unnerves him, and he... Well, I do not know what you mean. Look with your own eyes. You can clearly see we have no room. And who are you, child, that you travel with these... He glances at the others, but does not say anything else.
Soren turns as Ebba's speaking to the bartender. He manages to hear what she's saying before he comes over. Lying. are you? As he turns to the bartender. What is the name of your lord in this keep?
Our protector is Mitru. And as he says that word, the entire inn goes quiet. The entire inn, as he says that name. And everyone pauses in their conversation. Most of the people in this room are men. And they appear to be rough-hewn woodsmen, native Transylvanians. And everyone pauses and looks in the direction as he speaks the name Mitru.
Lord Mitru.
Is our protector.
Of course. Before Soren smiles at the man and looks over at Ebba and smiles at her.
Henrik is as a how in opposition does this go against the Road of Kings to back down from this?
Well, you've been told that, not intruding upon another lord's keep and manor, that's a perfectly honorable excuse. There's no one here to give you hospitality. So while there's nothing against the Road of Kings by simply forcing your way to stay here, there's nothing against the Road of Kings by moving on. It wouldn't be considered weakness because there's no one there. There is supposedly supposed to be a lord here, and he has not offered you hospitality, or he isn't here to offer you hospitality.
But at the same time, though, for the keep to be totally abandoned, not even to be have servants or men behind to keep the place.
It is unusual that he wouldn't maintain his household while he was away.
It's unusual?
That is unusual, yes.
This is a tough decision. Milo, do me a favor. Could you give me a roll to see if you can persuade Henrik?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, that will.
Persuading. Yeah.
Yeah,
okay.
Try to persuade me.
That would be charisma expression.
All right. Well, I just and that's public. Yes.
Yeah, public. Four successes. Milo makes a very strong case for not making too much noise here and just moving on. Henrik, that the mortals will not be happy at all because they've been traveling all day and they're wet and tired and hungry. But on the other hand, if you force your way here, you can't see all the pieces of what might happen if you do. Maybe nothing, but maybe something else.
Milo would argue that maybe we could try and ask for at least a meal like he already offered, and a shower or like a bath for the ladies, and a bit of time here before we move on. At least a couple of hours maybe for the men to get something to drink and eat and relax a bit before we move on. But apart from that, yeah.
I nod at Milo. This does sound like sound advice. And I just nodded my head and I go back into the inn. Innkeeper, tonight is your lucky night. But we will take you up on the offer of provisions. And as well, you will provide baths for anyone who requires it, free of charge. And for that price, we will move on when they are done.
His bearded face splits into a smile of clear relief as he looks at you. And, "Aye, my lord, agreed." You noticed, however, as you walked in, he was having a tense conversation with, surprisingly, Ebba and the Tremere with you, Thorin.
as Henrik and the innkeeper kind of make this agreement, Ebba would kind of scoff, and kind of roll her eyes to the side, looking over at Soren, and then turning her back towards the innkeeper entirely, and glancing over at Henrik.
And Henrik just kind of gives her both a questioning and a challenging look, as if, is there something you want to add? He has at his eyes. Because obviously she seems to want to say something.
As Henrik says this, she kind of shrugs a little bit.
No, I say that with my eyes, like, kind of like giving you that kind of raised eyebrow look. Like, is there something that you want to tell me? Look.
Right, and she picks up on that.
Okay.
And kind of shrugs a little bit. He's a liar, she says, point blank.
And I kind of come over to Ebba. If he is lying, then the truth will be revealed soon enough. But as long as his fables do not affect us this night, it may not be a matter of import. We do have bigger things to look forward to besides the lying tongue of an innkeeper in the middle of nowhere. But do keep an eye out just in case for treachery.
As Henrik says this to her, yes?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. She kind of eyes him for a moment, and there might be a little bit of a challenge there, the expression she gives him. She's picking up clearly on his his Ventru mentality as he kind of takes over the role of leader and all that. So she doesn't do anything more than give him that look, and eventually she kind of slips from the stool and kind of snubs the innkeeper while she walks off, and she is actually going to walk out of the inn entirely.
And as Ebba sweeps off, the camera pans to the rest of you.
Is Henrik finished? Has Henrik finished what he's saying right now?
Oh, yes.
All right. Milo will step forward then and address the innkeeper. Is there any chance that we might be able to secure a bath for those a few members of our retinue?
Certainly, I will have the fires drawn, my lord. It will take some time for the water to heat, but should be able to accommodate you.
Thank you very much. You will say without. Yeah, pretty matter of factly.
They will have to bathe in the kitchens, if that is not to your objection. And I should note, he seems to switch between Hungarian and Romanian quite easily.
I wouldn't understand the Romanian, right? I only understand.
Correct. Once you spoke to him in Hungarian, however, he turns and speaks to you in Hungarian.
Okay. That is very well. As long as there is no peeking eyes, naturally. Then.
Yes, of course. Their modesty and chastity will be preserved.
It's better, he says, and he gets shortly a very serious look on his face, but then it turns back to his normal, matter-of-factly look. Very well, thank you. And he will step back and take Lorraine in his arm again and look to the others.
What is Soren doing?
Soren is standing next to Henrik, eyeing the barkeep, and then his eyes turn to gaze over at the men that had stood up, almost ready to attack them. if need be.
They seem to have relaxed a little. The man holding the torch has put it back into its place.
Smirk kind of draws across Soren's face before he turns away from the bar. And he turns and where's Nikolai?
If memory serves, Nikolai was lingering in the doorway of the inn.
Yes.
Soren is going to make his way over to Nikolai before he nods. Care to join me?
One moment. Where's Henrik at this point?
He's standing near the barkeep with... go ahead and answer.
No, that's pretty much where I am.
Okay.
I'm just kind of keeping an eye on everything.
So Nikolai makes his way from the doorway up to Henrik, places his hand on his shoulder. Perhaps extra... What would he be drinking? Wouldn't be beer.
Ale?
Well, that's beer.
Yeah.
Do they have anything harder than just your standard ale at this point?
You're not sure. You could ask the barkeep.
Perhaps some extra ration of something to drink for the men be appropriate.
So long as you could pay, we have spirits.
Oh, no, that was for Henry.
We will see about acquiring a barrel of ale while we're here. For the road ahead.
And with that, he's going to turn, walking away from Henrik back, basically just straight out the front door.
Wait, priest, I want to speak with you a moment. I turn back to the innkeep. Make sure that we secure that a barrel of ale for the trip.
Yes, my lord. I will see to it.
How much? My man Orlin will see to the payment.
He nods and bows low.
I take Nikolai off to the side. Priest, Father Nikolai. Though I have noticed that you may have had some trouble communicating with the people within our group.
They did not appreciate my efforts to save their souls.
Just remember this. If any of them disrespects you beyond a point of no return, we can always have them lashed. Sometimes it takes a bitter lesson to show the peasants the light of God. But to know this, you have my support in this. But do not let them disrespect you. If you allow that, there is no going back. You must show them strength.
I doubt it will come to that much.
That is all I wanted to speak with you about. But also be aware that we need to have a council about our trip to Bistritz once we leave here. Once we enter that city that is ruled by, and I keep my voice down on this, Zemitzi Lord, things could be very dangerous if we do not have our stories straight.
Aye.
Once we have the others, once we have taken care of these mortal concerns, we will gather the others and have a council amongst ourselves. So be thinking of these matters. And Henrik basically goes back and he kind of leans against the bar, and he's keeping an eye on the barkeep because of course he doesn't trust him at all. And one of the things he will do is that once I see him secure that barrel of ale, I will make him actually drink a pint of it himself.
He clearly seems a bit annoyed by this suspicion, but as he's having the barrel brought out from the back and you stop him and force him to fill a mug, he does so and tosses it back and wipes his beard and swallows and looks at you.
I just wanted to thank you for your hospitality thus far, I say with a slightly evil grin. Take this barrel out to the carriages.
He motions to his laborers and they do so.
And I give him almost a mockingly friendly pat on the back. Do not worry, innkeep. We will be out of your hair soon enough. And then you can live with your secrets.
Thank you, my lord. All right, so with that, is there anything else anyone would like to do, or shall we segue into the next 2 hours as you prepare to leave Napoca?
Milo would, before leaving the tavern... Oh, sorry. Go on.
Oh, you can go, and I'll go after.
Okay. Milo would just shortly step forward and ask the innkeep about the how long it takes to travel from here to Bistritz once we get on the road.
He tells you it should only take 8 hours or so, and you will have to pass through the mountains, but the snows should be thawed by now. In fact, many of the merchants here are preparing to leave as well.
All right. And as he says that, Milo will take Lorraine in his arm and walk out of the inn.
Lorraine complains slightly about not being able to sleep in a proper bed tonight, but other than that, other than her very mild whining, she doesn't say anything else.
He just gives her a kind of sweet look and says, "Don't worry, we will soon be in a place where you can get the accommodation that befits a lady such as you." And he gives her a smile.
So as everyone is kind of slowly trickling out of the inn, Ebba is actually already gone, and she had hesitated at first, kind of looking around the streets in this region that they've found themselves in, and her eyes kind of lingering towards the direction of where the keep was, and she actually leaves the group, and she makes her way down the road, heading towards the keep, curious about it.
All right, so we're going to follow Ebba for the moment. Switch scene, and she seems to be going to do something specific. Investigate keep. As she does so, the camera is on you, Ebba, as you approach the central stone keep. It's a very stout building, smaller. It's perhaps 3 or 4, even 4 stories high, 4 levels high. Towers over the smaller hovels and buildings, and even the church itself. The windows are dark and shuttered, and there's clearly an air that it's been abandoned.
She would stand kind of before it, not right in front of it, several feet away, but looking up at the large stone structure before her and taking in the immensity of it. And she's going to look about. Does she see guards or any type of servantry or anything like that?
There's no one.
She kind of looks over her shoulder for a moment. Are there guards circling the streets and monitoring the city?
There are a few, but they seem to either be gathered by the gate or gathered around the visiting caravan. No one seems to be paying attention to a small girl.
Um, He's going to circle the keep. I'm assuming it's pretty large, but it's not going to take her like an hour to circle it or anything.
No. It's nothing like that, but you find you can't circle all of it, as some buildings have been built up against its walls at the base. But other than that, you do see that there's only one way in through the front doors, the gates, which seem to be shut.
She says, kind of under her breath. Well, she's curious enough to want to go inside and investigate more, so she is actually going to kind of look around her, see if anybody is around to see her, and if not, if she's kind of tucked away behind one of the hovels or in an alleyway somewhere nearby, right next to the keep, she's going to actually morph into a rat. That's possible?
No, your only forms are wolf or crow.
That's right. Gotcha. Well, then the crow. She's going to morph into a crow. And as she does so, much like she had before, it's the sight of it to any humans would have been quite horrifying. I mean, one minute she's this tiny little blonde girl, the next minute, just in a poof of almost magic, she turns into this black crow and she flies up.
No one notices your transformation as you feel the power of your blood come to the fore, and suddenly your arms become wings and you feel feathers and your mouth elongates into a beak and the whole world seems to get larger as you shrink. But a moment later, as you spend a blood point for your transformation, you have become a crow.
And as she morphs into this crow, she flies high and up over the gates of this keep, and she actually is going to circle it and see if she can find a way in, perhaps through a cracked window or just something.
Most of the shutters are completely closed, but you do see there is one which is cracked open. It's near the very top of the keep.
And as she kind of soars higher and higher up, and she spots this kind of crack within the shutters, the kind of the brisk breeze against her feathers, she is going to aim for that crack and slip in, her wings spread as she flies through.
And as you fly into the keep itself and penetrate through the shutters, you find yourself in a dark and musty room. It's very, very dark. There's no light at all, in fact. You can't see anything in your current form, although you know that if you shift it out, you might be able to use the eyes of the beast to see in the dark.
And she actually does exactly that. As soon as she slips into this room, immediately she would morph back into her normal self. And she actually, with ease, kind of like rolls onto the ground and lands with her feet and her hands on the stone flooring. And as she looks up, she uses the eyes of the beast. Immediately, they just penetrate through her blue hues, and she's like a beast within the darkness.
Ebba's eyes, as they shift into the bestial pinpricks of light in the darkness, immediately you are flooded with the sight of a faint tinge of blood red in this room, and you're able to make out the tragic scene within. You see skeletons. You see the rotted forms of what must have once been a noble family. One of them are hanging. One of them must be the man, is hanging by his neck from the chandelier, his bones swaying gently to the left and to the right. There's dust everywhere, choking this room. Clearly, it's not been tended to in some time. A woman huddles her baby, both of them mummified, in the corner up against the bed, while there are several more skeletons laying upon the floor, rusted daggers protruding from their backs.
As soon as she takes in this horrific sight, she slowly stands, her little knees bending upward as she looks and takes in these skeletons and obviously the horror that they entailed, whatever it was, and she doesn't feel anything for these poor people, their souls, whatever happened to them, but a thought does cross her mind as she remembers what the innkeeper had said, and kind of under her breath she mumbles in Swedish, "Protector," as she remembers him saying about this supposed lord that lives here. And immediately she kind of slowly turns, and she's going to make her way to wherever the door is, hopefully to leave this room and explore more of the tower.
It doesn't take you very long at all, perhaps 20 minutes, to explore the keep itself. You find no more bodies. Most of them seem to be, judging from their withered and rotted clothing, the nobility that once lived here, isolated in that top room. Everywhere else is abandoned, covered in thick dust, your little delicate bare feet disturbing little tufts of dust before moving on, like a silent ghost moving through that shadowy keep. Clearly, this place has been abandoned by, for a very long time, perhaps years even.
So what I saw up in that room, it was obviously the nobleman who lived there and his family.
Judging from the clothing, yes.
And they were killed.
Yes, they were very clearly, violently killed.
As she kind of explores the rest of this abandoned keep, she obviously is starting to get a pretty clear picture in her mind of what probably took place here. And she is slightly confused by it, only because she's not quite sure why the innkeeper had lied about it. But I mean, can she make a roll to try and maybe figure this puzzle out in her mind?
Well, yeah. Go ahead and make an investigation intelligence roll. The difficulty 6.
So, as she kind of makes her way to that bottom floor, and she's taking everything in and kind of mulling it over in her mind, she does kind of put several of these little pieces together, and she is kind of thinking that the innkeeper was pretty careful of saying that this lord was in fact their protector rather than referring to him as lord. And he just seemed very anxious about having them all leave, and obviously it's quite clear he was trying to keep whatever was in here a secret. So therefore she can only surmise in her mind that she doesn't believe the man hanging upstairs in that room is this Mitru that they were speaking of. Perhaps whoever this Mitru is, either he or the villagers themselves, had a hand in this lord and his family's murder. So with that, she kind of takes one last look, almost hauntingly, up the stairs, and then eventually she would probably make her way back up, or maybe even try to find another way to leave the tower from the first floor, maybe by opening one of the windows or what have you. It doesn't matter. Either way, she can either fly. She's going to turn back into her crow form. And
well, I should say that the moment you open the shutters from the first floor, it is a bit of a drop, but it wouldn't require that you shift. It's a 9-foot drop or so, but that's nothing to you.
Oh, nice. Well, then she, if she does notice this, which I mean, she's a pretty keen girl, she would eventually just look down, realize that it's not that bad of a drop, and she'd probably slip her little figure through the small crack and make a leap for it.
Normally, an adult-sized man or woman would not be able to fit through this shuttered window, but you are a small child, and it's quite easy for you to slip your way through and drop down, a silent ghost falling from the first-story window. Like I said, it's only a 9-foot drop or so, and it might have injured you were you still alive, but as a vampire, you land easily upon.
And in fact, she's quite silent as well as she lands on the ground and stands up after a moment, looking about to see if anybody spotted her.
No one seems to notice you. What does Ebba mean to do from here?
She kind of mulls that over in her mind a little bit, but eventually she would probably leave the keep and its courtyard and the designated area that she has found herself in, and she's going to probably make her way back to where the others were. She's not going to seek out Henrik. In fact, she's probably going to seek out the Tremere. He seemed to have picked up on the fact that this man had been lying also to them, and she's wondering what he will think of what she's discovered.
So with that, we will switch scene back to the inn, where we find the rest of the coterie just as Ebba heads in that direction. What is everyone doing? And I should say by now the baths have been drawn, and food has been distributed, as well as any ale or water. Your men are most of your men are not in the tavern itself. Most of them are outside taking their meals, kind of spooning soup out of wooden bowls into their mouths, which steam into the night air, and everyone's sort of talking in terse tones. It's clearly a little tense, and it will be, you have a feeling, until your group leaves.
Well, Henrik, until he gets new information, he's simply going to continue to oversee the, to make sure everything goes smoothly so they could depart this mud huts as fast as possible, so they can make ground. So, like I said, Hendrik is pretty much going to be overseeing things until it's time to leave, unless some new information presents itself.
So the camera will shift to Nikolai and Soren, who are sitting together within the inn.
What's the thing?
Please. Soren is fine. As he takes a last scan around the room. Odd, isn't it? I haven't been in many inns in the general population, but I can't help feel that this place is somehow strange.
The people are suspicious. Believe they are aware of what we are.
Yes, and that seems to be precisely my point. Why? Why do they know who we are? How are they experienced enough? It's all very strange.
unwillingness to help a traveler. Very unusual.
As Soren kind of waves his hand a little bit, leaning into the table. But it is no matter. That is food for thought along the road. My real reason for segregating you is a simple question, Father. Do you, as he lifts his finger,
just for flavor, hold on, just for flavor. As he says, the reason why I segregated you, Nikolai grips his sword a little tighter.
As he lifts his fingers to his lips as he pauses on the question, he notices his tenseness, and he gets a bit of a smirk at the corner of his lips. It's nothing like that, Father, I assure you. I merely wish to ask you, do you believe in prophecy?
Prophecy is just another version.
Soren seems to relax as he takes in Nikolai's answers. Of course, I was thinking the same. Though something has come to my attention on my studies along the road. Do you remember the man that stopped us before we had entered the castle?
The crazy man on the roof.
He smiles again, of course. The madman shouting nonsense. I wrote down what he had said.
Even madmen. Truth. It is just how do you decipher their truth?
Indeed. DC is no precursor to madness. And this is something I pondered as I wrote down what he said. Though on examining exactly what he had said, it has raised flags, and I believe that it means something more, something deeper.
I do not recall. Ed, please, enlighten me.
He reaches into his robes and pulls out his book, unwrapping the leather straps as he thumbs through the delicate pages. Here we go. Now, this first bit, I'm not sure it means anything at all. It says, long have my eyes sought beyond to that which has been and will be. He rises and all must be ready. This I pick as general madness, prophecy, religion, priests, nonsense, excuse me. As he catches himself speaking to a priest, he kind of smiles. But this next bit, this is what concerns me. This is what has caught my attention. It says, soon you shall meet with one whose plans lead you into the heart of terror and exaltation. He quickly closes the book and leans forward. Now, if you had to name someone who fits that description, who would you say?
Terror and exaltation?
Yes, someone who will lead us into the heart of terror and exaltation.
It would certainly be our hunter friend. That's friend with a sneer.
Possible. Perhaps. But when it says soon, you shall meet with one whose plans. Of course, this was before we had our meeting. Yes? Our whole plan had not been established yet. Do you see the connection?
So, you mean Vertigan?
Soren holds up a hand as he does a very nonchalant look around the tavern as he speaks the name, and then leans in very quietly. Precisely. This cannot be a coincidence. The rest of this has to mean something. This is not madness. This is relevant. Relevant to us and our plans.
And at that moment, no one would have noticed a small child slipping in through the front door of the inn and making her way towards the table where the two men are speaking tense tones. But Ebba, you approach where Soren and Nikolai are sitting upon a table, somewhat removed from everyone else in the inn, and you see them speaking in low, hushed tones.
As she approaches and she kind of notices that they're speaking rather quietly to one another, almost in whispers, she would sort of almost creepily appear behind Nikolai's shoulder, kind of staring at Soren a bit as she speaks up, almost actually quite as soft as they are, but a little bit more hauntingly so. Whispering, I see, she says.
Soren quickly turns to see the small child and small figure of Ebba as his serious face quickly turns into a grin and a smile. Yes, of course. Come, young Ebba, join us.
Our friend here has raised some interesting questions. It is a possible theory.
She actually doesn't move and kind of blinks at the two of them before speaking again. Have anything to do with the keep that I just investigated?
Soren looks around once again and leans in. What is in the keep?
Well, as we assumed earlier, the innkeeper is a very tactful liar, she says, and she kind of gives them a rather kind of plain and almost unexpressionless expression, if you can call it that, as she kind of eyes Nikolai to the right and then looks back to Soren before speaking again. Whoever this Mitru is, I don't believe he was the original lord who lived in that tower. And I only say this because, and she kind of pauses a moment, well, the lord is dead, as well as his family. They're at the top of the tower.
Soren's eyes quickly glance over at Nikolai to see his reaction.
Nikolai, at that moment, looking around the inn to see if anyone else overheard Eva's statement.
As you glance around, you don't see anyone paying attention to you, although you do note that not so far away, Milo is looking in your direction, and he is quite far away, but he seems to be looking in your direction. You're not sure if he can hear you or not.
You would see a very slight change in his look as Ebba mentions this. Only fleeting, but you would see that he seems to have heard it, or heard something else at the very same moment that disturbed him.
She actually doesn't notice Milo's look, but continues on as they're kind of taking in what she's saying. Obviously, the villagers killed them. Either that, or whoever this Mitru lord, protector, is, she says.
Milo would slowly approach the group seated at the table. He wouldn't say anything, but he would clearly make himself part of the conversation, although not speaking yet.
Soren sees Milo approach and quickly shuffles his chair over to allow room for Milo to sit with them.
And where is Henrik during this time, I have to ask?
Henrik is busy overseeing the men and our preparations to leave.
Okay, so the camera will go back to the table.
Please, Miss Ebba, continue.
Did Milo approach as well?
Yeah, Milo is here now, but he is just looking at you, like he is waiting for you to continue as well, and he has a slightly disturbed look on his face.
As he approaches, she kind of gives him a look from the corner of her eye before looking back to the others after a moment. Well, I don't see why the innkeeper would not let us stay there until I went and I saw what happened. They're obviously hiding something. They're keeping it a secret. That's why I know it was probably the villagers, and whoever this Mitru character is. Did you notice anything suspicious about the villagers when we entered?
No, I sadly did not. I was focused on my book at the time. As he looks around to Milo and Nikolai.
Milo will shake his head shortly.
She looks over to Nikolai at that point, wondering if he noticed anything about the town folk in the city. She shrugs. Well, it was clear they were obviously stabbed. There were remnants of daggers in the corpses, skulls.
Was there any clue to how long they had been dead? Milo would say very quietly.
If Ebba could surmise, what would you say?
Oh, years. There was hardly anything left but bones and rags.
She would shrug again, rather nonchalantly. Years, I would say.
This is not a new charade.
Interesting.
He would look very thoughtful.
And at this, she would kind of look over to Nikolai. How do you think they know what we are? She says, kind of a little bit auspiciously.
Do not have an answer. Or how?
Soren leans into the group. It's easy to surmise. Perhaps this true character is working with the Zamitzi, and they're using this place as an outpost.
As Soren says this, Ebba looks over to him and kind of raises a brow. Her mindset was kind of going in that sort of direction, but to hear the words, it does take her back a little bit.
It does speak to the nature of this place, though. We are truly within our enemy's lands. It's best not to inform Henrik of this while we stay. We can inform him on the road. It is best that we move on.
Milo would look to Soren as he says this, disapproving. Clearly, he's not sure that. Clearly, not that he doesn't agree with keeping it from Henrik. Although he can see the wisdom in it, obviously.
She doesn't notice kind of Milo's expression, but she does hear Soren's words, and she actually would agree. She doesn't feel that there's anything more they can really do about the situation, and to cause trouble here might hinder their journey. And so she kind of pauses a moment before nodding rather slowly in manner. I agree. I don't think saying anything to the Ventru is going to do much for the man.
Precisely. He must be made aware, but not right away. He might feel compelled to act, and we need him not to act just yet.
Besides,
Milo is really. Oh, sorry, go on.
they're already dead. She looks over at Milo.
Milo is looking very, very torn. On one side, if these villagers have truly killed their noble liege and replaced him with someone else and killed his own family as well, he wants nothing more than to cut all their head offs and burn this place down. But at the same time, he agrees with the sentiment that it is not wise. So he is still undecided, but he nods to the rest of the group after a while. But he's clearly not. Yeah, he's clearly very not happy about it.
And how is Nikolai contemplating this?
Their remains should be put to rest, but now is not the time.
And with that, leaving the Cainites contemplating their situation, that this dark secret they've uncovered in Napoca, we're going to fade out for now and end that scene.